The sound of metal scraping against concrete pierced the morning air like fingernails on a chalkboard. I rushed to my front window, coffee mug in hand, to witness a scene that would forever change our quiet neighborhood. There in my driveway stood Patricia Dunlap, our HOA president, yanking at the newly installed handicap parking sign with both hands. Her face was contorted with rage as she screamed about visual clutter ruining the aesthetic appeal of Maple Grove Estates. What happened next stunned everyone watching. A silver sedan screeched to a halt at the curb, and out jumped Patricia's husband, Robert. He sprinted toward her with a speed I didn't know a man in his 50s could achieve. His hand shot out, slapping her wrist away from the sign as he shouted for her to stop. The small crowd of neighbors who had gathered gasped in unison. Patricia stumbled backward, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, clearly shocked that her usually docile husband had dared to intervene. This whole mess started 3 weeks ago when my father Gerald moved in with me after his recent hip replacement surgery. At 78 years old, Dad needed assistance with daily activities, and the doctor had prescribed a handicap parking permit to ensure he could safely access medical appointments. Following proper protocol, I submitted all the required paperwork to both the HOA and the county. Within days, we received approval for a designated handicap spot directly in front of my house. The installation went smoothly on a Tuesday morning. The county workers were professional and efficient, placing the regulation blue and white sign exactly where specified. Dad was thrilled, knowing he wouldn't have to struggle with long walks from distant parking spots anymore. I thought that would be the end of it. How wrong I was. That very afternoon, I noticed Patricia standing across the street, arms crossed, staring at the sign like it had personally offended her. She stood there for 20 minutes, occasionally shaking her head and typing furiously on her phone. I should have known then that trouble was brewing. Patricia had a way of making mountains out of molehills, but this time she was about to create an entire mountain range. Patricia Dunlap had ruled our HOA with an iron fist for the past 3 years. A real estate agent by profession, she treated our neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Every blade of grass had to be precisely 2 inches tall. Every mailbox had to be the approved shade of forest green. She once fined the Johnsons $200 because their garden gnome was facing the wrong direction. The morning after the sign installation, Patricia appeared at my door at 7 a.m. sharp. She wore her signature pearl necklace and a blazer that screamed middle management. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed at the handicap sign like it was a personal insult. She informed me with a saccharine smile that the sign was an eyesore that destroyed the carefully cultivated ambience of our community. I calmly explained that the sign was legally required and approved by both the HOA and the county. Her smile faltered, replaced by a thin-lipped grimace. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia launched what could only be described as a campaign of passive-aggressive warfare. First came the emails. Every morning, I would wake up to find 3 or 4 messages from her, each one citing different HOA bylaws about maintaining property aesthetics. She conveniently ignored the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements that superseded any HOA rules. Her emails grew increasingly unhinged. One claimed the blue color of the handicap sign clashed with the earth tones of our neighborhood palette. Another suggested that the sign's reflective surface could blind drivers and cause accidents. My personal favorite was her assertion that the signpost's metal composition could interfere with residents' Wi-Fi signals. I saved every single email and forwarded them to my lawyer friend, who assured me Patricia was digging her own legal grave. Then came the gossip campaign. Patricia made it her mission to turn the neighborhood against us. She held impromptu meetings on her driveway, gesturing wildly at my house while speaking in hushed tones to anyone who would listen. She told Mrs. Peterson that property values would plummet. She warned the Gwynns that this was just the beginning of the neighborhood's decline. The situation escalated when I caught her in my yard one evening trimming my rose bushes to obscure the sign. When I confronted her, she claimed she was simply being neighborly by maintaining the community's appearance. I documented everything with photos and videos, building a case for the inevitable confrontation I knew was coming. Patricia's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started parking her car illegally close to the handicap spot, claiming she was merely utilizing public street parking. She submitted formal complaints to the county, alleging the sign was improperly installed. Each complaint was dismissed, which only seemed to fuel her anger further. One particularly memorable incident occurred when she hired a landscaping crew to plant a massive shrub directly next to the sign. When I confronted her about it, she claimed with a straight face that she was beautifying the neighborhood and had no idea the 6-foot-tall bush would obscure the handicap sign. The county made her remove it within 24 hours, threatening hefty fines if she didn't comply. The look on her face when the inspector handed her the removal order was priceless. Her husband, Robert, began showing signs of strain. I'd see him in their driveway speaking in hushed, urgent tones on his phone. Once, I overheard him apologizing to someone about his wife's recent behavior. He started avoiding eye contact with neighbors, hurrying from his car to his house like a man being hunted. The poor guy was clearly at his wit's end, caught between loyalty to his wife and the embarrassment of her actions. The breaking point came on that fateful morning. I had just poured my coffee when I heard the metallic scraping sound. Looking out the window, I saw Patricia with a crowbar attempting to pry the sign from its concrete base. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled and she was muttering about taking matters into her own hands. I immediately grabbed my phone and started recording. As I filmed, Robert's car came speeding around the corner. He must have received calls from concerned neighbors because his face showed pure panic as he jumped from the vehicle. The slap wasn't violent, but it was firm enough to knock the crowbar from Patricia's hands. It clattered on the pavement as Robert grabbed her shoulders, his voice carrying across the yard as he demanded to know what she thought she was doing. Patricia's response was to turn her fury on her husband. She screamed that he never supported her, that he was weak, that someone had to maintain standards in this neighborhood. The gathering crowd watched in stunned silence as years of marital tension exploded in my driveway. Robert's face flushed red as he announced, loudly enough for everyone to hear, that he was sick of her behavior, sick of the complaints from neighbors, and sick of being embarrassed by her petty tyranny. What happened next surprised everyone, including Patricia. Robert turned to me, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion, and apologized profusely. He explained that Patricia had been spiraling ever since she lost a vote to expand HOA powers 6 months ago. The board had wanted to limit her authority after numerous complaints, and she had taken it as a personal attack. He promised to pay for any damage to the sign and insisted Patricia would be getting professional help. The crowd began to disperse, but not before several neighbors approached me to express their support. It turned out Patricia had alienated more people than I realized. The Smiths revealed she had fined them for having the wrong shade of white trim. The new couple in Unit 12 shared that she had tried to prevent them from installing a small ramp for their elderly dog. Within hours, an emergency HOA meeting was called. I submitted my video evidence along with the documentation I had been collecting. Other neighbors came forward with their own complaints. The meeting lasted 3 hours, with Patricia attempting to justify her actions as protecting property values and maintaining standards. Her arguments fell flat when the HOA's lawyer pointed out the significant legal liability she had created. The atmosphere in the community center was electric. Over 50 residents showed up, a record for any HOA meeting. Patricia sat at the board table, her usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous fidgeting. As neighbor after neighbor stood up to share their grievances, her face grew paler. The Kowalskis revealed she had measured their grass with a ruler at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. The elderly Mrs. Chong tearfully recounted how Patricia had humiliated her in front of her grandchildren over a misplaced recycling bin. The most damning testimony came from Patricia's own vice president, Janet Fuller. She revealed that Patricia had been falsifying meeting minutes, adding rules that were never voted on, and using HOA funds to hire a private investigator to find violations. The audible gasps from the crowd when Janet produced the doctored documents were followed by angry murmurs. Someone shouted that Patricia should be prosecuted for fraud. The board voted unanimously to remove Patricia from her position as president and strip her of all committee assignments. She sat in stunned silence as the vote was read, her carefully constructed kingdom crumbling around her. The board also voted to reimburse me for any legal fees incurred and to issue a formal apology to my father. The police were called to file an official report. While the officers decided not to press charges, they issued Patricia a formal warning for vandalism and violation of ADA regulations. They made it clear that any future incidents would result in arrest. The handicap sign was reinstalled the next day with a tamper-proof base and additional security measures. The county inspector who came to oversee the reinstallation mentioned that Patricia could have faced federal charges for violating ADA regulations. The fines